You say whatever?
No,
Or
it's not a long story.
This is Senate Transportation Committee. I'm Rich Westman, the chair. It is Wednesday, March 19th. We are here to discuss the aviation budget and, you're on.
Great, thank you. Thanks everybody for having me. My name is Evan Robinson. I'm the aviation program manager for the Vermont Agency of Transportation. I'm here to discuss the fiscal year 26 governor's recommended proposed budget for the aviation program. Again, thanks for having me. What we're looking at here on screen is a photo of the Northeast Kingdom International Airport in Coventry, Vermont. As you can see, it gets various and great amounts of use throughout the year. In this case in particular, we had several visitors in various jets and general aviation airplanes, and that was a nice representation of a little bit of the variation we see at our airports.
It's a very pretty photo.
Yeah, absolutely. Oops. Oops, there. All right, this slide, I realize I did not include this in the handout that I sent Megan yesterday, but I thought it was very important to represent on the screen here for those folks who don't know, a visual representation of the airports we have in Vermont. So the Agency of Transportation owns and operates 10 state airports. Those are the green icons, and they're dispersed throughout the state. There's also a network of privately owned public use airports represented with the blue icons there, Shelburne, Basin Harbor, Sugarbush, Post Mills, Deer Valley. And we do have very limited interaction with those. We don't provide them funding in any way, but we do provide them with sort of operational support, assisting with their 5010 inspection for the FAA, helping making sure that the information that's published about those airports is updated and correct. So that's sort of our interaction with those privately owned public use airports. Now, for the 10 of the others, again, we're responsible for the aviation operations at those airports, project development, as well as maintaining the state-owned facilities at those 10 airports.
The private ones, the private airports, they collect landing fees and things like that. It's just part of their business structure.
Yeah, that would correct. That would be independent of any interaction we have with them. I'm not aware of any of the public use privately owned airports that collect any type of landing fees. Essentially, those are the ones that have been established as open to the public.
And they don't collect fees.
I would have to follow up with that. Not that I'm aware of.
How do they pay for their upkeep?
Just private investments for personal use. Perhaps they operate businesses out of them that are not connected in any way to the state aviation program.
Right. I wonder. Yeah. And then
sorry, go ahead.
So when they sell fuel, if they sell fuel, which is who they do, that they would be collecting the aviation fuel.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any that sell fuel, but yeah, if they were to, it would be looped into the aviation fuel tax for the state of Vermont. They would have to report that. And
the pilots know that when they land there, there's no fuel lines.
Yeah, so that's publicly available information in FAA publications to let folks know the types of services offered at those airports.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And then is the Deerfield Valley one still operating? Because I thought it was.
Yeah, that may be. I actually have a personnel member reaching out to just confirm that I have also heard that same thing. It still is published in the FAA guidance, so we include it or the publication, but we're working right now to confirm that has been decommissioned. If that's the case, we'll help facilitate that documentation chain.
Okay, and then I just want people to know there's a fair amount of individual places where people can land, strips that are on the FAA.
Yeah, correct. Those are
Separate from me.
Yes.
Yeah, so that would
a lot, like 20 or more.
Yeah, those were what we would call restricted landing areas. So those are privately owned, private use, and those have their own set of procedures to become established and put onto the FAA registry for active airports. And this is just a snapshot of the nationwide federally supported airports. There's a file of them. A little bit again here before we get into budget, I just want to high level priorities for our agency, safety being the first. Now that's safety for all aviators that visit our airports, our users, our VTrans personnel, our community, and the events that we have at our airport. Safety is number one. And it's our goal to provide a well-maintained facility for public use. Now, the compliance with the FAA or state and local regulations, those are, again, right next to safety, of course, our utmost priorities. We have, for 9 of our airports that are federally funded, and I'll get into that in a second, we have 40 grant assurances to go along with those. So we receive federal funds and we have stipulations and guidelines for the operation of our airports that we adhere to. And of course, fostering aviation growth in Vermont is a big priority. Whether it's economic growth, commercial development on our airports. One of those grant assurances spoke to is the FAA would like us to create as sustainable airports as possible, self-sustaining as possible, I should say. So it is always on our forefront of priority to provide good economic growth at our airports, generating revenues for the operation of that airport. General aviation promotion. Now that could be the local pilot that owns an airport. It could be a youth organization that's looking to get into aviation. We host several camps and are involved with lots of STEM engagement, field trips, etc., and looking to really leverage that to help show the value of our airports to communities as we were able to. Moving into the future, we're essentially in like this new golden era of aviation, where we have to be mobile and look for ways to accommodate a diversifying aviation fleet. Advanced air mobility, in a nutshell, would be like what Beta's doing in Burlington. Some really innovative aviation concepts, and so we'll really be looking for ways for the agency to leverage how we can support that infrastructure and accommodate it in the state. Again, community engagement. We have great events at our airports and look to continue to increase our capability.
Since you raise all of that, what's going on with the Franklin County Airport?
In what sense? Sorry, like as far as the Franklin County, like
you know that there's been talk of a business going in next to that. It was right next to Franklin County Field Days, and they had to give up the Field Days field. What's going on? You know, there's a lot of and not being there and up on it. That's why I asked.
Okay, no, thank you for clarifying that. So at Franklin County, well, first I'll start about talking about a statewide effort that we've been conducting in response to some legislation for trying to increase the economic growth at our airports. Now, in response to that, we conducted a large-scale statewide partial pre-permitting of potential hangar locations. Now, those hangars could be built for commercial use and or private hangar development. Now, what we went through is we received operational stormwater permits for areas that had been identified as potential building locations on the airport. So we have those operational stormwater permits, and then we took the Act 250 permitting for those predetermined footprints as far as we could without input from the developer. So we have this partial pre-permitting of many areas on every airport that are, you know, we front loaded the effort to be able to hopefully streamline folks to be able to come in and conduct business on our airport. So that's one really big effort that just came to completion like last month. We finished Rutland and Bennington. All the others have been completed before. So essentially it's somewhat of a green light for developers to come in and with more ease build on our airports. So that I wanted to mention is specifically at Franklin County. In the first quarter of this year, we have actually 2 interested parties for potential business or building and developing on the airport specifically at Franklin County. And then as far as the field days goes, that has been an agreement that that the area they're in has been earmarked on the airport layout plan approved by the FAA for future aviation development, whether it's a large scale business to come in and operate in that area. So as far as the field days, as far as I'm aware, is in the process of finding another location separate from that. And that's an agreement that has been in the work. I think they had their lease expired. I would have to double check, but I believe at June of this coming year.
Well, they didn't have the field days there this year, so.
Right.
I don't know any of the details about it.
Okay. Yeah. So as far as I know, they're looking for another location. I think there are some things in the works with that. Now, as far as there isn't like a business or an entity lined up to step into that position or into that area, but that has been earmarked as a potential to provide economic and aviation growth there.
Go ahead.
So if you don't identify a business immediately and they don't find a spot, are they out now? Could you check into this for us? You might not have the answer right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
If there's no business and that land is going to sit there for 2 or 3 years before we figure out what we're going to do with it, do they stay? Can they stay?
I think there was I will have to follow up
Okay, that's fine.
on this, and I think that's probably the right thing to do so I don't misspeak on any of the happenings there. I'd like to follow up and get back to you all on the current status of the field days. That's okay with everybody.
So the other question, and Senator Kirchlich might understand this better. I know that going back some years, the concern was by, at that time, Senator Mazza, that the airports were costing us a lot more. This whole effort of becoming more commercialized and more attention to using the facilities more and break even. And there was some plan with all of that in that piece. Where is that?
Yeah, so again, this would be an effort to increase revenues to become as self-sustaining as possible. Now, that is certainly an uphill challenge. There's no doubt that we have significant operational costs, facilities costs, but our mission again is to increase that economic growth. So I'm not aware of as you speak of what Senator Mazza had said, specific action plan for that. I would have to follow up to see, if I was able to relate where we are consistently, but
are we better? Are we worse than we were 5 years ago?
We're poised again. This hangar pre-permitting, we're poised right now to be able to increase those opportunities at every one of our airports. And I would say because of that, we are absolutely in a better position right at this moment than we were 5 years ago. We had to put significant investments into our FAA compliance through capital improvements. Over the past decade, we've worked really hard to sort of get our airports up to speed, so to speak. And now we're able to focus more energy and money into that economic development portion of that. So I would say with confidence right now we're set up, and our team has that as one of our largest priorities aside from safety and compliance is to contribute to that economic growth. So would be happy to follow. I'm excited to follow up in coming years as well to show the growth that we've exhibited on our airports.
Okay.
Thank you. So, Beta was interested in a significant, relationship with one of the airports. I don't remember which one. Is that all, is that done?
Are you, I'm assuming you're referring to the potential sale of Caledonia
Yeah.
County Airport. So the potential sale of Caledonia County Airport is in progress right now.
Okay.
We do have a purchase and sales contract signed with a potential buyer. And the status of that is it's currently being worked on with the potential buyer and the state. There's a committee in the Agency of Transportation working on that and working with the FAA to facilitate that sale. That's ongoing at this time. There's nothing. We've not met any steps beyond a purchase and sales agreement, but I without being able to provide all the details of that, I can certainly say that it's being worked on by those three parties: the state, the potential buyer, and the FAA currently.
And will it stay public?
That is one of the stipulations of that, is it would remain perpetually a public use airport.
Great. And then does the legislature have a role in that, or?
So the legislature back in
You already did.
23 voted to allow this process.
Okay, great.
We put some of those requirements on there,
Oh, great. Okay.
reporting back. So it's taken a lot longer than we thought.
Yeah.
So is it mainly the FAA kind of component part that?
Without projecting directly, the ball is certainly in their core. In the time that's happened, there's been some change of language on some FAA reauthorizations that have caused the potential buyers in the state to go back to the drawing board to sort of amend the proposal to fit the needs of the FAA.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
No projection on when that would happen.
There is currently no timeline, unfortunately, that I'm able to share. As we get shareable information, we certainly will keep everybody in the loop.
Well, I was waiting to hear what you're gonna say about community engagement, just because
Yeah.
I want to just talk about helicopters a little bit.
Oh, all right. Yeah. So community engagement. It's a priority of our team to get people to the airports to see the value that we provide, to see the variation of operations we have there. So we are very open to supporting the community, whether it's hosting an event, field trips, again, like I said, and could be presenting at a select board meeting for a town just to create awareness about our airports, and it could be a specific project. So we're very engaged with the community. Like I said, we understand the impact on the 10 towns directly and surrounding towns that our airports have. So we absolutely connect with communities in many different ways. And I have to hit my last bullet point here because it's my favorite. This is kind of personal. I like to have some fun along the way. I mean, aviation is a really great technology. It's engaging and it's fun, and we'd like to keep that in it. I think that creates sheds positive light on our airports and their function. But did you want to follow?
Well, definitely, it is fun, and that's especially small planes. I think are really fun. You can see a lot. So, just helicopters are a challenge, and they're becoming more popular. And you probably know how towns, the way the regulations are, and you all probably know the federal government has jurisdiction once it gets above the ground. And so towns can restrict areas kind of from helicopters, because helicopters can be just really annoying to people. We dealt with that a lot in the
Is it noise violence?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, and some, there's, but they can really be very impactful.
Do they
hot
have
areas.
mufflers?
I'm sorry?
Do they have mufflers?
Good question. No, it's just, I think it's,
Not the motor.
maybe they're working on, actually beta, you know, they're better.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
couldn't resist. We
Yeah.
just did a noise
Yeah.
coming here.
Yeah.
It's noise and then it's also privacy too.
Yeah.
Because they can be, so I just want to just point that out, that that's a real challenge in the state. And there are more of them, and we should just be alert to that.
Are you referring to drones as well, or just?
I wasn't, but you're right. Yeah, yeah, the drones are an issue too. And all of that gets just really complicated because of the federal
Yeah.
jurisdiction.
Absolutely.
But with helicopters, we can plan ahead. So we just need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, certainly municipalities have the say in zoning bylaws, right? Or
As long as the bylaws exist, they have to do it before someone comes in.
Right.
For a permit, because it doesn't take a lot of space.
Right.
Can't help that.
Quick funding overview. Primarily, we have our federal funding sources from the FAA. Now we have a yearly state apportionment for our state to use however we see fit, so to speak. Non-primary entitlements. We have Bill AIG money that expires in 26, the sunset for that program. We'll utilize funds from that through 29. We have 3 years to use those. And the big one is discretionary grant funds. So based on safety priorities from the FAA, what's going on in the region, they have this flexible money that we can apply for these grants for specific projects. And a lot of our bigger projects come from that discretionary grant fund. Our state key fund allocation is used for the operation of our facilities, maintenance at those facilities, aviation operations, keeping all of our snow removal ops going, our vegetation management ops. And again, also used as a state match for those federal projects. We're going to go through those here. Airport generated revenues, we have currently 189 private use hangar leases for the square footage that those leases sit on our airports. We have 32 commercial leases. We own 12 hangars, and some of those we rent out. The state manages that, and then some of them, the businesses on the airport manage those as part of those business agreements. We also have fuel sales at several of our airports. For an example, the total airport revenue for fiscal year 24, of course, we're not through 25 yet to be able to report that number, but was $382,681. On average, state apportionment for the last fiscal year is $520,000. Non-primary entitlement, $1,300,000, and monies used for the bipartisan infrastructure law, $1,465,000. And then the rest of the federal funding coming from that discretionary grant allocation that I spoke about.
So in the 520 apportionment, that's the state share of.
No, that's money. It's classified as a state apportionment. Each state, based on their airport infrastructure, gets a certain amount.
Okay.
Kind of like a percent, like a formula fund,
Okay.
right? And that's what Vermont gets. It's not tied to a specific project, but that's just say, hey, here utilize
I
this
was
for
in
X,
your
Y, Z.
last slide, you said it had a state share and a federal share, and
Yeah.
I was just trying to figure out how much.
Yeah.
And the airport's made 380. I was seeing what the gap was.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The gap is significantly more. I don't have the fiscal year 24 revenue versus operational cost handy. I can follow up on that for you to give you a better sense.
The
of
T
that.
fund request for this year for aviation, all of aviation, 7.4 million.
Yeah, and sorry, I skipped over that in the last slide. Apologies. That is what the governors recommend for the T fund allocation is $7,474,433. Thank you for that.
Just to follow up on that, is there a goal of some amount of revenue to generate
Like
to cover the expenses? Is there a goal or a policy?
There is not a current like target per se.
Yeah,
Of course,
like-
as much as
let's
we
have
could possibly
80%.
muster. No, but 100% of the revenues generated on the airports get credited to the T-Fund Aviation for the following year. So like that's a federal grant assurance, is that all revenues generated on a federally funded airport can only stay within that airport system.
That's reasonable.
Yeah.
But does the state have any sort of say, we're gonna get, I assume we're not making 100%.
Oh, no,
Not even
absolutely
close.
not.
So,
I will have to follow up on the exact number. But I believe the operational costs of our airports for fiscal year 24 was over $2 million. So there's a significant difference in operational cost versus revenue.
so it just might be good to have a goal because,
Yeah.
because you did increase the rates for the private hangar leases, some of them at least.
Yeah.
And people were upset. So,
Yeah.
but I think that's all done.
Yeah, that's current. Back in 2000, I believe 18 was when the sort of the business plan changed, and that's where there were some rate increases. We currently are undertaking a project where we look intensely with a consultant at our sort of business plan
Okay.
per se, because we understand that perhaps we could do better in the future with becoming more sustainable and improving user relations. So that is something that we're just starting. We're just getting the scope of work from our consultant and the fee and looking, and that's a huge part, is this sort of lease agreement business structure on our airports. So the short answer to your question is we agree with you, and we're addressing this. And like you said, identifying some goals and targets is in the works right
Good.
now. Yeah.
Good.
So we're sort of transitioning into, again, this new era of aviation in Vermont. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have this is an image of our airport in Rutland. And we had a recent project down there, so highlighting the runway rehab and the upgraded LED lighting that's very visible during the daytime now. But we have 1,068 acres of area to mow on our airports. We have 9.37 million square feet of pavement to maintain. 782 acres of easements that we need to maintain around those airports. And we have over 130,000 linear feet of fence line to maintain for safety, security, wildlife mitigation. Getting into the governor's recommended budget here, in Bennington, we are currently just wrapping up an obstruction study at the airport for this fiscal year. And moving on, we'll be able to identify obstructions to remove. That's the obstruction removal line item you see there, 5,000 for the T-Fund. And then be able to, based on those, before we can remove those obstructions, we will pursue navigation easements. Now, we have the responsibility to keep our approaches to our airports safe. And to do that, we work with our right-of-way group to identify parcels of land from private owners or to where we need to maintain the vegetation. It could be topping a tree, cutting a tree down. That's a potential obstruction. So we have money allocated to pursue those easements for fiscal year 26, as well as remove the obstructions. Additionally, in Bennington, we have a large project that's happening this year. This is part 2 of a project that was for fiscal year 25. There's 2.25 million total project allocated in fiscal year 25. And the money for the apron reconstruction, which is that large area of pavement you see, the large square area in front of the hangars and the maintenance facility, will all be reconditioned. Again, that was a large discretionary grant we got from the FAA to fund that. We also have environmental assessments associated with those obstruction removals as well, as a line item for Bennington. Every 10 years, we're getting on a cycle for where once in 10 years we'll visit an airport and conduct a master plan update. Now, that's information a consultant comes in to do to help guide our decisions for that airport in the future. It's used to as the basis of our capital improvement plan. And it provides support to the FAA to allocate that funding. So that's coming up in 26 for Bennington. Berlin, EF-NAP Airport, not much on the docket for fiscal year 26 there. We are currently, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we're pursuing navigation easements on the southern end of the EF-NAP Airport. We recently completed an obstruction study and an associated environmental assessment, and now we're able to pursue those easements to do the easement maintenance. Rutland, Southern Vermont Regional. Picture there on the right is our engineered material arresting system. We have a safety area limitation on the south end of the runway. Essentially, it's an airplane overrun. Picture like a runaway truck ramp on our airport. So those are individual blocks that are made of a material. So where if an airplane or a jet were to overrun the runway, instead of going over the very large retaining wall we have there, they would come to a stop. It would stop them. And we have maintenance obligations for that. So that's the first line item there is the EMAS maintenance. That was a federally funded project, but maintenance falls on the states to conduct.
Is it new?
No, it's not new. I believe it's around 10 years old.
Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, is it like this thing?
Yeah, you should.
Are they still doing flights Rutland?
Yeah, so they are. So Cape Air operates out of there 3 times a day with scheduled flights to Boston. So we have a TSA and a TSA presence there as well as that scheduled traffic. We're doing some professional engineering design work on the terminal apron rehab. Now the apron again is that large area of pavement in front of the terminal where the planes would park. And every X amount of time, those are up for a recondition or a rehab based on their useful life. So we're doing design work for 27, 28 upgrade of that apron. Now the P-Valley to Pappy upgrade. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, you might be getting to it, but I do want to ask just about the TSA grant fund because I'm shocked that it's from the T fund and not federal funds.
Yeah, so this is new for us this year. And I need to do a little more follow-up. I don't have the answer I know you're going to be looking for here. We recently lost that federal funding. Yeah. So unfortunately, until we can come up with a plan to hopefully get that funding back, that is out of the T fund allocation this year. I'll be certain to follow up and get more information on that because that was recently asked and I haven't been able to find the answer quite yet.
Yeah, I think I would just raise that anytime that we're starting to see federal monies go away that we had believed we were getting, it would be helpful for the Agency of Transportation to inform us when they filled the gap with T-Fund dollars because we learned that they're not, and this is not on you, but we learned that they're not doing that with the EV funding stuff. So it's surprising to learn that that money was just immediately included in the budget to be covered when the federal money went away, but not for other priority issues. So it would be great if you could highlight for us if there are other examples of that. And then I would just, to those watching, and Mr. Murphy included, anytime that a federal grant has been taken away and it's been plugged with T-Fund dollars, it would be helpful because that feels like a lower priority to me than some of the other things the feds have dropped that I think we could fund. So.
Okay.
The TSA was like,
Well, I don't think a grant of 130,000. I mean, what does the grant do?
Yeah, so the grant goes to the TSA. I believe they use it to supplement their operational costs to have their equipment and their personnel at the Rutland Airport to meet the Part 139. So sorry, let me step back. Rutland is the only Part 139 certified airport in the state, in that essentially it's a higher level of operation, like a more stringent criteria.
Yeah.
And essentially it all boils down to the ability to offer that regular passenger service to it. So like Cape Air needs TSA there to screen passengers to get on their airplanes. So again, I would need to look more into the history of that. The 130,000 to be used, but it goes towards their operational costs just to be there. It supplements it.
Yeah, I guess it seems like an unfunded mandate that we're having to use T-fund dollars to fund federal, I mean, these are federal officers.
Yeah.
These are not state officers. We are subsidizing federal workforce with state dollars, is my understanding of what is occurring with this.
Yeah,
So I respect, yeah, I don't think we should get rid of passenger service, but it feels a little bit backwards.
understand. Yeah, I will do some follow-up and get back to the committee to clarify the use of that.
Thank you, I appreciate
Yeah,
it. And
of
thank you
course.
for knowing.
Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead.
That's a good point. And could you, when you do that, could you see what Burlington does? I know they get a $500,000 pass through, but
Yeah,
see if they lost their federal funding or if they ever had it or how that works.
yeah, that's good. I do have an upcoming meeting with Nick Longo from Burlington Airport, and I'll make sure to bring that up and see what they have on their side. Yeah. Just to finish up here, we have a navigational aid upgrade of PVASI to PAPI. Now our pulsating visual approach slope indicator, it's old and outdated. The federal FAA is allowing us to upgrade that. So we have both design costs and construction costs for fiscal year 26 for that upgrade. And that's guidance for airplanes to more safely make their
photos.
Yeah, that's the existing PVASI, but it'll be upgraded to a precision approach path indicator, PAPI, just a little different system. So, and then obstruction study on the north end, we have our Malzar lights, our medium intensity approach lighting system. It's those fancy blinky lights you see like in the Shaw's parking lot at Berlin or across the Winooski River in Burlington. We have a system like that, and we have trees that we need to look at getting rid of in that area. Moving forward, next to Coventry. We're currently in the process of actually just starting this week, building the terminal building at the Northeast Kingdom International Airport. And we have T-fund allocation and federal funds through a Northern Borders grant for that project. And like I said, that project, the contract's executed. They're moving, mobilizing stuff there as we speak today, bringing in a temporary trailer. So that will eliminate the old terminal building and construct a new one. Now, easement maintenance, I spoke about the federal FAA giving us money to pursue navigational easements. Then it becomes our responsibility to maintain them. Trees always grow, vegetation grows. So we're getting our airports on ideally 2 airports a year on a cycle to where we allocate some amount of T-fund to a couple specific airports every year to get them on a maintenance plan and manage those so that those fast growing could be invasives don't come back. We're going to manage them to ideally keep the understory low and to not promote those. So little crunched on time here. So I'm going to cruise right through. Please stop me with questions. Highgate, we have a fencing project. The perimeter fencing, we're doing design work to complete the fence surrounding that. Now that's fences, as you know, are twofold. They provide safe and secure airports, but they also reduce wildlife impacts inside the fence at our airports. Again, linking back to the safety of all users of the airport. We are also doing design work for the completion of the parallel taxiway. In this photo, the taxiway is off the main runway. It's a place for airports to go north-south along the runway. That will extend all the way up to the north in the top right of that photo. We will continue to the end of the runway. It keeps airplanes off the runway when they're back taxiing or going back to make another takeoff, increases safety. We have some grassland management going on. There's been ongoing issues with potential wildlife impacts based on these projects. So Agency of Natural Resources has identified that grassland management as part of a permit condition that we have for the airport. So we've allocated monies to ensure we comply with the A&R permit. Again, easement maintenance, maintaining our approaches safely. That's the other airport that's on the list for this year is Franklin County. Sorry, the first line item, perimeter fence environmental assessment. Second line item on the bottom here related to that fence is the design work associated with that fence line. Middlebury Fuel Farm, we're looking for $385,000 for that one, and that's the second half of money that was allocated for fiscal year 25. We're currently getting ready to order the tank in fiscal year 25 this coming spring. The bid is out. I'm not sure if the contract is executed, but then the construction of that, so it would take about 6 months to make the tank and deliver it. And the construction would happen the following spring, next spring of 26. Middlebury Airport is
So the fuel farm,
Yep.
does that mean that they'll sell fuel for planes coming in?
yes, correct.
And will that be the only, how many airports have the ability to do that?
So currently, we have, well, Middlebury has interim fuel right now, so they do. The only airport that we don't have fuel available at right now is Caledonia County. And that was due to some equipment. We had to decommission the fuel system there recently.
And is there some estimate that we're gonna put the fuel farm in and we're gonna sell this much fuel?
I don't have the estimate or the numbers off the top of my head on what is the average fuel sale for a general aviation airport in Vermont.
There's fuel there now.
Where's that?
Yeah, in Middlebury.
Yeah, there's
Not the new-
temporary fuel. So one of our FBOs, our fixed base operator businesses, has leased a fuel truck and is conducting the fuel sales there. So not every airport generates fuel revenue. It depends if there is a business there that a part of their agreement to be there, like that's partly in part what attracts a business there is to be able to manage the fuel system and take the revenue from that. So at some of our airports, we have fuel revenue. Right now, it would be Morrisville, Middlebury. Once that this fuel farm is installed, the revenue of that. Caledonia before it was decommissioned. But the other airport, and did I say Morrisville? Sorry. The other airports have FBOs and businesses that manage and take revenue from those fuel systems.
And Burlington.
Yeah, Burlington has they have their own FBO that does the fuel.
We would put a tax on it.
Yeah, they would still report the tax on the fuel sales. Yeah, correct. We're working on a design project for a terminal building in Middlebury. And then also an environmental assessment associated with that terminal building. And then the federal government allows based on usage in a certain period of time, the federal government allocates monies for snow removal equipment. So we're pursuing a 90-10 match on a new piece of equipment for Middlebury.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've heard from you've got a senator who lives right near this airport, as I'm sure you're, who has raised and introduced, I don't know if he introduced it this year, actually. She's introduced a bill, I think every year she's been in the Senate around noise, but also just interruptions and from the airport. And I'm wondering if you've invested or looked at sound screening or visibility screening for that neighborhood.
We haven't specifically looked into sound mitigation efforts for that neighborhood. Certainly would be interested to see what eligibility there is on a federal level to support noise mitigation efforts. Again, would have to follow up on that and
Okay.
yeah.
It would be great if you could follow up over email or something
Yeah,
about that, because
sure.
I know that has led her to vote against the T-bill in previous years.
Okay,
So,
yes. moving forward, on to our Morrisville Stowe State Airport. We are currently, this fiscal year, so 25 and 26, we're getting ready to put out to bid, for an apron expansion. Now, apron again is that area of pavement in front of the hangars, promotes economic development, right? So as you see on the right side, that light gray shaded area, the 45,000 square foot apron, and an additional parallel taxiway, again shaded in the light gray, heading to the right, where it says taxiway Alpha 3. We're working on a project, and that's our priority project with the FAA this year, to increase the safety at our airport there. So we have both design and lots of construction funds allocated to that in 25 and 26. Recently, we acquired fully reimbursable money from the FAA to purchase a home that is on the border of the airport property. And then what we have here, for that property acquisition, the $80,000 is for the demolition of that home and cleaning up, grading the area, making sure that it remains a safe parcel, and that nothing happens while the home is there. So
Is this one of the busier airstate airports?
it certainly sees lots of traffic, recreationally based, seasonally based. It's one of our very busy wintertime airports, with small scale private charters that come in to that area. We absolutely have other airports that are busier in the summer with flight training, et cetera. Franklin County is one of those that sees like huge amounts of flights.
Morrisville's been up and down.
Yeah, it really could fluctuate with the conditions of the recreation that surrounds it, but it's well visited. I receive a lot of calls for people from out of state looking to come in there.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is not a reflection on your work, but I do have some concerns that we are essentially using public dollars to fund the use of private planes. And for the most wealthy, and most of them are not residents here. And that makes me think it's a misuse of public funds when we're going to be unhousing potentially 466 children and more than that of adults, that we're spending this amount of money to kind of keep up private infrastructure for the wealthiest people in the world, people who can own a personal private jet or airplane to get them to their ski vacation in their second to fifth home in Stowe has raises some red flags. I'm wondering if you could either check my assumptions on that or speak to why.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid. I hear you. I hear you with that. That's long been associated with airports and aviation as a whole. I think it's really important. Again, I wanted to say I hear that and very privy to that. But I would like to point out there are unseen intangible community benefits to having our airports. Just for example, some of the operations that we see, some of many would be life flights, like a life flight having access here, a DART helicopter being able to come in to and potentially save lives. That's number one. Number two, seeing freight come through. We have daily flights at two of our airports it's called Ameriflight, and the packages that are delivered locally through UPS come through two of our airports, not to mention Burlington. Again, speaking to that sort of community engagement that I would like to prioritize in coming years is getting people to our airports to see the community benefits we have. We host, our airports. We have groups on our airports, nonprofit groups that host Young Eagles events. So these people, they use their private airplanes to promote aviation. They get people started. Out of their pocket, they pay for through sponsorships of their clubs for folks to get their pilot's license to pursue a career in this. So while I certainly hear that, I hear your concern with that. I also do think there is a tangible and recognizable community benefit to the airports.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Pat.
So in addition to that, I'm assuming probably not a question for you, but for maybe the Chamber of Commerce, the tax revenue that these folks bring into the state when they fly in.
Yeah,
It's probably not recognized by the Agency of Transportation, but the Chamber might have a number.
right.
to Put to that too.
Good point.
Right, right. And again, just an anecdotal, I've had pilots specifically at Morrisville. I had a great conversation with a pilot from Pennsylvania that did talk about coming multiple, but like I'm talking more than 6 times a year to the airport and spending a week at a time, in our communities in the area, right? So to your point, there definitely is a trickle down from utilizing these as an access point to bring monies into the community for economic growth.
Yeah, can I just add to that? So in the study that you're talking about, where you're analyzing the fees,
Yeah.
that should be a
Yeah,
component of it.
yeah, absolutely.
That's how to get more revenue
Yeah,
from those.
yes, absolutely. This is out of the T fund, Burlington International Airport, like you mentioned, there is their $500,000. And from what I understand, that they utilize that for their federal MAC as well. So for all the projects they have through the FAA there. Moving down the line, Hartnett State Airport, pursuing navigation easements there to support some tree removal for an upcoming runway 523 reconstruction down there. We have the design work as well for the runway 523 construction. I don't believe that project will happen until 28, but we're just keeping the ball rolling with that one for these various items. Now hitting the statewide airport operations budget, the T fund recommended allocation $1,500,000. Now this is for statewide aviation operations. The maintenance of all of our assets. We have fuel facilities. We have numerous thousands of lights, paint markings. We have equipment. We have snow removal equipment at all of our airports. We have a list of items. We have beacons, safety beacons that we maintain. To provide awareness for pilots. And some of those are, on mountaintops, right? So continual maintenance on a myriad of items in our operational costs. As I mentioned, we also own dozens of buildings, a dozen hangars and more terminal buildings, as well as snow removal equipment facilities at our airports. And we have a facilities budget to cover the utilities associated with those, maintenance associated with said buildings. And then we have a statewide aviation administration line. Now that covers the personnel costs, insurance associated with those, benefits, cost of living increases, et cetera. So the money there in the admin line is to support administrative costs of the aviation group. Again, any questions? I know we're right up on time, but happy to field questions.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm so happy to hear that we've now divided rail and aviation in a way that lets us kind of look at them as two independent departments. I don't know
Yeah,
what the right-
programs.
yeah.
Yep.
But I do think one of the key differences that I feel is between those two things is the carbon emissions. So that was I always felt like we were tying them together when I see rail as a carbon emissions reducer and I see aviation as a carbon emissions expander. So have you reviewed the climate action plan or the carbon emissions reduction strategies plan that I know AOT has worked on? And how do you work with reducing aviation fuel and how it is, one flight going one location can be at times the equivalent of hundreds of drivers on our roads. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to how you're prioritizing that, as we know that climate change is the greatest existential threat that humanity has ever experienced.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I have not had the opportunity in my 3 months in this position to dig into that. I certainly, with Secretary Flynn in the room, we'll look over and say that we'll look at that. And dig in because I hear your concern again. But I'm not familiar enough, honestly, with even our context with that. That's a follow-up item for me with Director Boomhauer and the secretary to see what we've done to look into that and address it. And if not, what will we do moving forward?
Thank you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. And good luck with 3 months in.
The secretary would like to comment.
Thank you, Chair. Joe Flynn, Secretary for the record. Just if I would add to Evan's comment, we're also engaged with Beta Technologies. We've installed at the Rutland Airport an electric aircraft charging station, and it's a dual purpose station which will also charge passenger vehicles as well as aircraft. And we're looking, and Evan may have the number, but we're looking at a handful of more of AOT owned airports for electric aircraft charging stations. And I understand your point, Senator White. It's not a wash, but I believe we're being as innovative as reasonably able to, considering our mandate is to maintain and operate 10 state-owned airports and have them available for general aviation. But we are cognizant of your point, and I think, anything we can do at our airports to enhance, sort of blooming technology, that's a piece of, I think, an answer to your question. But as part of, thank you.
Yeah, I think a little bit about carbon emissions, like our budget. We have a finite amount of carbon emissions that we as human beings can emit before we have tipped beyond the point of catastrophically changing our environment to an era we can't go back. And we're at a point where we may have, in some scientists' views, past that tipping point where we essentially are going to have to eat the problems we've made. But the idea of having a carbon emissions budget where you're trying to meet that in the same way we meet a financial budget was a helpful way for me to think about it. So I just wanted to share that. But I really appreciate that. And congratulations on 3 months in, and you've got a good team with you. And so does Dan Lever still I assume he's mentoring you?
Yeah. So he's supporting the transition of the two. And in that split, we also have had project managers that are now devoted, they're kind of aligned on the rail side, but they're still continuing to the transfer of knowledge / seeing out projects at ongoing airports. So there's this transition time that we're in the midst of right now.
Exciting.
Yeah. And just, this is the last slide here, really quick. Civil Air Patrol, for those who don't know, is auxiliary of the Air Force, and they conduct search and rescue operations, and they're based at several of our airports. We provide them funds to supplement their search and rescue efforts or flood recovery efforts and documentation as they have over the last couple summers. Pavement maintenance, that state apportionment, that's our fund that you see here, this $450,000. We have markings, crack sealing, etc. And then again, we have some design work associated with that for every year. So that rounds it out for me. Thank you all for the time, and I have some follow-up items and would certainly love to interact more in the future. And let us know if you ever want to come out to the airports. We'd love to have you all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Secretary Flynn.
Sure.
Just about a year away.
Yeah.
Like how Evan left the house, because I heard from the same thing. Very on brand.
Yes. Thank you all again.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Good morning.
And I think we all know you quite well, but, it probably would be good if you started with, background and stuff and your history and because, we'll need to talk about that a little bit.
Thank you. For the record, Joe Flynn, Secretary of Transportation, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning to talk about confirmation and a little bit about my background and address whatever questions you have. I spent a lot of life in the private sector. I came to state service in 2009 in the Douglas administration, and I was hired, frankly, at that time as a rail program manager. That was when Rob Ide, who had left the Senate at that point, had gone to AOT as a rail program manager, and Bonnie Rutledge was retiring, and Rob was getting moved to the Department of Motor Vehicles as commissioner. So Secretary Dill offered me the position, and I served in that role until August of 2011, when Tropical Storm Irene hit, and in part because of my background prior and including state government that some of the agency knew about. I was asked then if I would move to Brattleboro, which I did for almost 4 months, and with about 70 people from National Life for AOT, and living in the Super 8 Motel, and help
Living in what?
the Super 8 Motel on
Super
Thunder Road.
8.
Wow.
And
You know Brattleboro pretty
Was
well.
that high living?
it is probably one of the only places I've ever been for state government where the per diem you had money left over.
There you go.
But I had the privilege really of working with tremendous people and National Guard troops from 8 states. And we were responsible for the coordination of 54 towns recovery in the southeastern quarter of the state of Vermont. And as that evolved, then Secretary Searles, this was now in the Shumlin administration, asked what I wanted to do after that. And I said, I just want to stay here until the job's done. And I assumed I'd be going back to rail, frankly, at AOT. But as things wound down in Brattleboro, the governor stood up the Irene Recovery Office and brought in Neil Lunderville. And so I was asked to move into that effort with him and a few others, Betsy Ide, Rob's daughter, Mary Andes, who I think is still a state employee, Judy Gilman, who's still a V-Trans employee down in Rutland, people with certain skill sets. So there were like four of us. And we worked pretty much 7 days a week. And then toward the first of the year, the administration was making a move in the Department of Public Safety. At that time, a man named Michael Neal, former fire chief from Burlington and from South Burlington, was the director of emergency management. And the Department of Public Safety was moving him into the Division of Fire Safety as the director. So there was a vacancy in emergency management. I was asked by the administration if I would go talk to Commissioner Flynn, no known relation, other than all Irish potato farmers that still farm in the bag. So, when the governor's office asked if you'll go do that, you do. And, it was interesting. I mean, I had a lot of interaction with VEM in my roles as fire chief and a deputy sheriff. So I became the director of emergency management. So I never went back to V-Trans until now. So I became the director of emergency management in the Shumlin administration. And that role grew to emergency management and homeland security. Very interesting. And upon the retirement of Paco Almond, who some of you might know, Paco had been with the department for years. And
Paco every month.
yeah, you would, right? He lives in Stowe. When Paco retired, I was named the deputy commissioner. So I finished perhaps the last 18 months of my time, which was a 6-year stint at public safety as the deputy commissioner. And then in the election of 2016, November, throughout the transition process, after several meetings with Governor-elect Scott, I was offered the position of secretary. So sworn in January of 2017. And that's my state government history, if you will. Again, I did have a background in a while, but in first response, fairly in-depth background, both on the fire side and the law enforcement side. And so here I sit, $6 billion in budgets total since my time
I want to say as well that anything I say about anything I've done in state government is, for the record, it isn't because of me. It's not about me. None of it was possible without the people. I don't particularly look fondly on anybody who implies they. I mean, I'm in charge and I'm ultimately responsible. And I obviously have input and say, at least I think I do. But it's the amazing people that work for the state, frankly, across many agencies and departments. And as a Vermonter, I found state service rather late in my employment life. And I have to say it's been, and this is not pandering, it's just me. It's been the most rewarding time, quite frankly, certainly professional. It's been the most rewarding time. And that transcends. I've worked for Republican governors and Democrat governors. I even worked for Governor Dean, but I wasn't paid. So I transcended 4 governors and been pretty occasional, I think, of that. And so, I'm very grateful for that opportunity. And currently, of course, I'm very grateful for the role that I provide to the agency, both VTrans and DMV. And so, I mean, that's basically my history. Born in Burlington. Don't hold that against me.
So was I, so.
Where are you really?
I didn't know that.
And I've lived in Grand Isle County for almost 39 years, over half my life.
Questions?
Any, go ahead.
No,
That's it. Just like your vision going forward for the agency, what greatest challenges and greatest opportunity.
I'm gonna butt in because that's part of, what we've got some severe budget problems coming forward. And as a follow-up, in that, why would you want to do the job with the budget problems that I think we've got? And where do you see us going?
Thank you.
Because I see that as a.
If I may, let me start with the last question from Chair Westman and then Senator Perchford will get to your question. I'm not inclined to shy away from anything. And I choose, if it's my control, I work, as you know, for the governor on a daily basis as an exempt employee. But I hope to serve with Governor Scott as long as he's in that role. And as long as they bring value to the effort. And so, but I am, quite frankly, I'm inspired by the people at the agency. And when I speak of the agency, I'm speaking of both VTrans and DMV. I want to qualify that. But it's an amazing group of people. And as I said a moment ago, when I look across Vermont state government, I've really come to learn as a Vermonter that it isn't what you might expect. And I've been one of those that might have been critical in my life about how many state employees, right? And I've learned that was really ignorant of me to think that. And if anybody actually worked with state government employees, people who are public servants, they know pretty quick that it's a value that we just couldn't navigate as society if we didn't have it. We could talk about the policy piece of it and how much of one versus the other initiative, but at the end of the day, governance isn't easy, first of all, and it doesn't matter what the letter after a governor is. Governance is not an easy job, that. But I don't shy away from something, and I frankly wouldn't be comfortable. I'm well beyond retirement age, but I wouldn't be comfortable in my skin choosing to leave unless I was for the better of the effort. I just wouldn't be. I want to see it through. And I frankly hope that I bring something, to the effort at the agency. In the beginning, I probably, like anybody knew, I'm sure there were people who thought I micromanaged, and some of that was true. And the rest of it was really because I wanted to learn from the inside out. I have a hankering to do that. But I did learn that the agency was so much bigger than even public safety was, or my little part in rail before public safety. And public safety is complicated, trust me. But it wasn't feasible to micromanage, but I had not managed an agency of 1,300 people. So I realize that you have to be comfortable trusting the people who are the subject matter experts, and that was a fairly quick lesson. And so what I think I really relish the most is helping to lend whatever attributes I have to the effort that they do. And you know, at the executive level, helping to solve certain issues that eventually rise to the executive level to solve. And there will be somebody at the executive level. I'm very grateful that I'm that person at this time. I really consider it a privilege. And again, like I said, I'm past the age of retirement. So, and as far as what do I see about the future, you're absolutely right, both senators, as to the challenges we face with the budget. I certainly think this is a new time as well regarding Washington. Labor is going to continue to be a problem, and it is a problem today, and I don't see how that's going to change. I think it's going to take time, and I think that that's going to be a cycle, and I'm not sure. And by that, I'm saying if you look at the population, you know, we're the second oldest population in the country right now. Our school age kids, there's all these waves, but I don't know where we're at in the wave, but hireable people follow a wave of younger people, and I'm not sure we're at that point. So labor is an issue, funding is an issue, but affordability is an issue, and I think that's tied closely to funding. And I know we've had some healthy and spirited discussions in this committee in particular about revenue, and it's no secret that we worked hard in this administration to contain increases on Vermonters, and it's no secret that we need the state dollars, as you know, to match the federal opportunity. And that conflict, if you will, is I think only going to become more acute. And I do believe there will be conversations in perhaps the not so distant future about, you know, other ways. You all know that we have a zero bond balance right now. We were very proud to pay off our bonds a few years ago. We felt that it was the fiscally responsible things to do because we were able to. And that provides an opportunity. It has to be an opportunity, of course, that's, you know, agreed to at least at a policy level. But and I also think that we're at a pivotal time as well in the history of transportation infrastructure. And I don't have a solution for all these grand problems, but by that I'm saying when you look at especially the East Coast of the US, and I've said this I think in this committee before, but our infrastructure, much of it is at or near its life cycle when it was built. And that just exacerbates the issue as far as future funding necessary. And the
interstates were mostly built about the time you and I were born.
Yeah, they were. In fact, I remember as a kid, my grandparents would take us down Route 2 from Burlington, and we would sit on Route 2 in parts of Richmond and Bolton and watch what had been done, you know, with these giant, you know, scraper trucks and things like that. I mean, it's fascinating. And then, you know, where Senator Brennan and I grew up, we also watched the Burlington Beltline get built like that, but that was quite a few years later. But so, you know, any part that I might play in that pivotal time, or just being associated with the agency during that time, I certainly would enjoy, I think, appreciate its work. And we all work. And so, but I think it's important work. And I also, one of the things I really like, aviation, Evan Robinson, I just absolutely enjoy watching our developing employees. I mean, everybody there, you see them all come through here, various levels of experience, years of service and age. And I respect them all, but they all started someplace. You know, many of them graduated from Vermont Tech or UVM or Norwich. Some moved here, but they all started someplace, and they were all young employees at one time, weren't we all? But but I really enjoy the development and helping to provide, not me singularly, but being part of the opportunity to help our employees grow and see opportunity within the agency. And Mr. Robinson is an example, and as are many others at the agency. And that'll continue beyond me, but I enjoy that. So that's part of the question, but the challenges are clear. Labor is a huge challenge. Funding is a huge challenge. Currently, more or less in the immediate future, understanding what the reauthorization of the FAST Act is going to look like is going to be a really important reality. And I really am not going to forecast that. And we've talked before, the FAA reauthorization reverted back. So if that's any indication, it could be indicating concern. However, the one thing Congress through the years, regardless of who's the president or who holds the balance of power, one of the most consistent elements of congressional bipartisanship has been transportation. It just has.
Except for raising any revenue in transportation.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
But they have to give money over from the federal general.
right. Well, right. But I'm referring to the support. In other words,
Well, it's bipartisan and nobody's
Yes.
wanting to raise the revenue.
fair enough, right. Maybe another way to put it is that they might argue less about the need for transportation around the country. Right?
Yep.
So you have to look at that whichever way your lens is. And I say that because, people can't escape the fundamental reality that, and I might be a little bit biased here, but transportation really is the foundation. It's the linchpin of pretty much everything we do. We can't provide social services. We can't provide public safety. If people can't get from A to B, that's an issue. Former Secretary Brian Searles said this, so I won't claim anything, but, he said, if you think about it, every single day, pretty much almost every Vermonter in some fashion pings the transportation network. And even if you're an at-home shut-in, if you have DNA coming to your home, if you have meal deliveries coming to your home, if you have Amazon coming to your home, or UPS or FedEx or your mail person, if people are walking on sidewalks, driving on streets, jumping on bikes, hopping in cabs, going to the airport, the train station, commuting to work, get on a bus, and that's absolutely true. But myself included, we really all take that for granted until there's an impediment, until the road is really rough, or until it's closed because of a crash, or until it's really slippery, right? And we all have these experiences. And so I relish being part of the agency that's charged with quietly in the background. I prefer to be that way, even though it may not seem it. Just getting things done. I really do. I look at my colleagues and I think, boy, some of these jobs are so public profile. I'm grateful in so many ways to be in the role I'm in because it's important. It has purpose. It has meaning. But, generally speaking, it's just back there, just getting things done on a daily basis. And so that's really why I like doing it. And I choose to believe, as insurmountable as some of these concerns look like, whether it's funding, and I'm referring both state picture and federal picture, labor, methodology. We still do things in some cases the way things have been done for decades and decades, and maybe there's a better way to do certain things. I don't know, but I still choose to believe that that's the old adage: is the glass half empty or half full, and I couldn't do it every day if I just constantly thought the glass was half full. So I believe it'll get done.
You mean empty?
Yeah.
That's what I meant. Yeah, thank you. Right. Half glasses, right? No, that would be a terrible place to be if you had to look at everything that's half empty every day. So there will be a transportation agency. There will be responses to these challenges. There will be, I'm sure, swings in budgets going forward. There'll be swings in labor force, minimization, if you will, of our vacancies. There'll be growth of our vacancies. And to be part of that for whatever period, as I said a moment ago, that the governor thinks I still bring value to the effort, I'm all in. And I'm not going to solve all of these huge initiatives or problems on my own. I think they're far beyond one particular person, but I'm going to do my best while I'm here. And I frankly like what I do. I enjoy it. every day I come into this place, I still am sort of, kind of impressed. And again, I'm not pandering to anybody. I don't need to do that, but that's not who I am.
Cool. It's interesting that you started with trains because I mean, once you start with trains, transportation is really interesting, I think. So I respect that you don't want to be flashy. And this is actually isn't for you as a, well, let me just get to what I'm thinking about is, sometimes we don't, in my opinion, advertise the importance of what we do. And I'll just use transit as an example, but it's relevant to all the others. But when I talk to people about, or when people talk to me about concerns that they have, transportation is almost always the second one, you know, like housing or, medical care or economic development. They'll say, you know, this is an issue and gosh, you know, if we had transportation or something like that, it's always the second item. And they just assume that we can't do anything about it, but we can do something about it. And I think it would just be helpful, and maybe this exists somewhere and I just haven't seen it, to have just the analysis of the benefits of transportation. I mean, I know that it exists on a national scale, but I don't know if, and it's obvious when you're on the highway, and you guys do an amazing job with the protection, you know, snow plowing, and the highways are generally in really good shape. But with the other modes of transportation, I don't know if people really understand what's beneficial now and what it could be.
I mean, it's a good point. And I agree that I don't think we often enough, let's just use the word market, the various opportunities that we provide for Vermonters, or the ways in which we think some of these things are opportunistic for Vermonters. And I think it's been the culture. The culture has just been head down, get the thing done. And, you know, I believe that's changed, you know, over time with social media and multiple different platforms of pushing things out. I try to feel that I listen to people still on the cutting edge, even though I'm on the older end of that spectrum, if you will. But one of the other things I think I see that we grapple with is where's the best method to do what you're talking about? And I'm completely open to that and suggestion. I mean, we can put things on, we do. We have thousands of viewers on social media weekly. We put out a report, but you know, I even say this to our own people. If I get a beef with something, the last thing in the world I'm going to do is go look at the AOT website. Yeah. And that's not a criticism. It's a great website. Yeah, if you noodle through it, it's tremendous information. But what's another way to put stuff out in front of people? I mean, there's Front Porch Forum, there's obviously, but that's sort of localized. And I haven't yet figured that out. And we have an incredibly talented communications director, Amy Tatko. I'm sure she's been through. She's seasoned in her job. She's very good at what we ask her to do, and she's very creative. But clearly, to your point, Senator Harrison, I think there's a vacuum between a lot of the end users and what it is we think we put out there for information, and how to make that connect. I'm all ears. But I agree, when you look at the transit service that we provide across Vermont, you know, we publish, like, for example, we publish the successes we've had on the Ethan Allen regarding ridership increases. But here's the other thing. I mean, we can put out a press release about that, but this is my belief. I mean, the average Vermonter never sees that. They don't. How do they even get it? If it's not picked up by a news outlet, the news outlet often peruses all that, and they'll put a snippet out there, good story or bad story, and that's fine. But I don't know, how do you get that into the hands of people? And there again, I think most people, they're too busy I'm not saying that's an excuse for not doing something, but until it becomes a point of interest for them, they've got so much else happening in their lives, right? So I think it's a constant question. And again, completely open for ways of, marketing may not be the right word, but, just letting Vermonters know of the different sources of, not only transportation opportunities, but
Oh,
Just,
just one follow-up and then.
yeah, just a follow-up, and it's not even necessarily marketing, but it's like in the Act 250 conversations, transportation should be a big part of those conversations, and it was.
well,
But so, and I'm not
Yep.
trying to, but I think maybe at a level down where we're talking about policies
Right.
here, we
well,
could include transportation in other policy conversations.
and that's good.
Which
advice.
that's on us as
I'm-
more than you maybe.
And if we didn't make that a big enough concern on Act 250, then that's on us, and I have the responsibility for that. But I agree with you. I mean, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but I agree. I mean, our position has been, and I know we have testified in some committees about this, but should Act 250 really be compelled to apply to the Agency of Transportation if we're just rebuilding something that already once went through a NEPA and Act 250? Quite frankly, my belief is, and I believe it's the belief of, I know it's the belief of the administration and the agency, is the answer should be no. We spent an entire year at the Exit 17 project in Colchester having to go through the local Act 250. We provided every single thing that we had to do for the federal government. It took one more year for that local district office to decide there really wasn't anything different. There was one thing. Now, I used to serve. I served for 12 years on District 6. I am not condemning Act 250. I think Act 250 can do a lot of good. And it was interesting service. It was good. I enjoyed it. I had to get off when I got these jobs. But to your point, which I think you're saying is, is it a redundant expense of money and time when it comes to transportation projects? And I don't want to mischaracterize your statement, but I thought that's what I heard. And, if we're not saying that loud enough in this building, then we need to do a better job. If we were building a brand new road, which we don't do much of in Vermont anymore, but if we're building a brand new road, we totally get it, totally understand. However, the facts are that NEPA generally hits everything Act 250 would address, but for, maybe the one appellant who can tank the whole thing. And so, and eventually the transportation project will prevail, but it could be years and years and years, especially if you have to deal with an appellant, in a situation that's litigious. I've often used an example in this committee and others. The Main Street Waterbury project was 25 years. I signed documents that have been signed by a secretary 25 years ago. Now it's done, good project. Route 2 out through by the Goodrich Sugar House that was rebuilt by J.A. McDonald 6-7 years ago. I'm told that project was 20 years. Now, you talk about future problems. How do we fix that without throwing out all the checks and balances? There's got to be some happy medium. Now, if the agency stalls the project because of funding or whatever, that's a different story. That's on us. And I'm not blaming all of those delays only on permitting or certainly Act 250, but I think it's honest to say that between historic preservation, Act 250, and I have very spirited conversations with my cabinet colleague and good friend Secretary Moore, because we are compelled to comply with all that as well. It adds time and it adds expense. And so again, it sounds like we can do a better job of messaging that within the building.
That actually is really good to know, but I was looking at it from a different angle, which is that VTrans as part of the regulatory body. But you don't need to talk about that because I don't want to use all your time.
Well, no, if you're
But-
talking about the 1111 permit process, that's about the only thing
That-
issue.
And how towns towns don't have the authority that VTrans does, and when they have the authorities that Act 250 has now, that's a gap. But that's just too much of a detail for
Okay.
this
I'm happy
conversation.
to have that.
But but thank you. That was really helpful to know about the other.
I will tell you, the 1111 permit process is in Michelle's shop, and she'd be the first to tell you, and she's not here, so she would be the first to tell you that many times I'm like, hey, what's up with this 1111 permit? Why are we, why? Because we shouldn't be part of that problem I just opined about, as far as delays. And you weren't saying that,
Well-
I'm saying that, but
Yeah,
and most of the time, we're not a problem. It's just the information may not be complete, so we can't give the permit. I don't think there's a problem there, but if there is, it comes to my attention. And as I mentioned earlier on, there are things that pop up to a secretary and,
I think you add value there, actually, in many cases.
I hope
It's both.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Secretary Flynn, for coming and speaking to us. I'll just put out on the table, I think you do a really good job at the work that you have been tasked with doing in your public service. Is a career-long endeavor. So thank you for your investment of time and commitment to our state. I really appreciate that. And for taking the time to come down to the southern part of the state as well, because it is maybe Wendy, you might agree with this, but I think sometimes we get a little bit lost in the conversation with state level officials. So I appreciate that you've taken the time to do that. And with your knowledge of Irene, I think that's probably a motivator to go back and make sure everything's still good. But I mean, when you first came into the chair on like day 2, I hit you with like 10 different questions that I had some frustration around. And I was told this was not the time to ask those questions. I also don't think now is the time to ask those questions. So I'm going to limit myself to one,
Okay.
Which is, municipalities are struggling. They are, in my opinion, or at least anecdotally, what I hear from constituents is XYZ road is bad. XYZ intersection is bad. XYZ bike and pedestrian route is not appropriate for me, or I don't feel safe on it. And most of the time I look up where it is and it's a municipal road or a municipally managed project. And that signals to me that the state is hoarding resources when municipalities are in desperate need for them. So that the infrastructure the average Vermonter is interacting with daily is not being maintained to the level that they expect. And I think that's because the Agency of Transportation has hoarded the resources that could be going to our municipalities. And I don't believe in any budget you presented an increase. And not that it hasn't had an increase, but I don't believe your agency has ever presented an increase to the town highway aid formula, other than one that the legislature has imposed on that budget. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to why that is occurring, if you agree with those sentiments, and how are we supporting our municipalities when they seem to be struggling to the greatest degree with transportation issues?
It's a lot there to unpack, but I wouldn't expect less. You asked good questions. But let me just say, first of all, the highway aid formula is in statute, so I'm not passing the buck, but we follow the statute. Well, no, we follow the statute on the highway aid formula. It's based on the number of miles in the community. As far as our budget to communities, if we park the 26 budget at this point, because it's not, as passed or as signed in the law yet. But in the federal fiscal 25 budget, we raised the amount of total aid to Vermont towns from the 24 budget, which was 97 million. We raised it to 100 million. So I do believe, for the record, that the record should indicate that the agency is directing, at least into from the 25 budget, $100 million to Vermont communities. So then, and
you're going to change the formula, but you haven't put money.
Well, that's the sum of all of the class 2 paving and town structures and highway aid. So that's the total of all that. It's $100 million. And that was up from 97 in the 24 budget. So that's a lot of money. We're not hoarding money. We're giving $100 million in the current fiscal year to Vermont towns. Now, I think the real issue here is it enough? And I also think that we're at an acute time with Vermont towns because we had 2 years of flooding in a row. which has completely not only ripped apart infrastructure in many Vermont towns, but it's ripped apart their budgets.
Yeah.
I totally hear you. And so, you know, as I've also said, we come forward with a finite budget. Our budget is not a budget that is brought in based on what we want to do and hope we get the appropriate general funds to do it, like many agencies and departments. Our budget is based on the amount of money we know we're going to get, which is the only way we operate, and that's from the federal government. And then we, as we said a moment ago, the really tough part for us is to come up with a state match money for that. But we entered the legislative session regarding a budget, knowing what the top line will be and where the money's coming from. And to your point then about how do we give more money to towns? You know, the way I see that is this: if I've got $1,000 on the table and that's all I have to work with, and we want to redirect some money to one of the slices of the pie, if you will, on that chart, then it has to come from someplace else. And I don't offer that question to be argumentative. I was a select board member in South Hero. I get it. That we're fortunate. We don't get hit with these floods other than inundation flooding, but that's not anywhere near the destructiveness.
This is alluvial.
Right. That's correct versus erosive. But, well, that's inundation flooding is what we get. We don't get the erosion flooding. But the point I'm making is that I totally understand. I spend a lot of time in towns. I'd much rather be in my personal pickup and driving out and getting my boots dirty, talking to somebody in the town than a whole lot of the meetings I have to be in. And I don't mean this one, but or any with my boss, but you know, I just know who I am. I'd much rather be out. And I get it. I walked into Plainfield on a day when they didn't know how they were going to make payroll.
Yeah.
In the summer of 24, they were still waiting for money from FEMA for 23. And I've known Bram since 2015. And now they did get a check the following week, but I met with Lieutenant Kirby, pickup truck to pickup truck on a muddy dirt road, and listened to the select board member tell me he didn't know what they were going to do.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm not home deaf to that. But to your point about we're not giving enough money, we have to then decide, we talked earlier too about this legacy infrastructure, that much of which is coming to the end of its useful life. How do we manage that? Because that has to be maintained. And we also have a federal obligation to maintain that. So that's really where this gets complicated. Because if we don't maintain our federal network to a certain standard, the federal government will tell us what our priorities will be then. That's a fact. And I'm not offering that as an argument.
No, I understand.
It's a reality. And that's not aimed at this current federal administration. That is the rule of the Stafford, I'm not Stafford Act, I'm confusing FEMA. That is the FAST Act.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so, I mean, it's just, where do we get the dollars to increase what we give to town?
Maintenance.
Well, okay, that's fair, but then what else do Vermonters not expect of us to do?
Yeah.
That's all. Because you're right, those are the only dollars we have the flexibility to work with
Yeah.
in the totality of our budget.
Well, I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Go ahead, and then
Well, I just want to get to this one question, which I told the secretary had asked about this email that went on the Vermont Local Roads thing on September 26th. And, you know, we had a long email exchange about it. And I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I thought the email was inappropriate. I thought it was a political election email sent on a state email listserv that was about local roads and helping towns. And I appreciated your answers, except what seemed like I didn't hear from you that you also thought it was inappropriate. And I want to see it, kind of ask you directly, was that email inappropriate? Is it inappropriate to send political emails on a state email?
I've asked that I've instructed we not do that any further.
Right, I get that, but it seems like you don't want to say that it was inappropriate. And I get that you don't want to say it, but I guess why don't you want to say it was inappropriate?
Yeah, this reminds me of watching some of these hearings. There's nowhere near the same, but I mean, like when I watch some of the people in their hearings,
Yeah.
federal level, it's like,
Like-
why won't you answer the
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
Thank you, and I appreciate you and I have had some healthy conversations about this, and I respect that, and I do appreciate the note last night. Here's Here's why. If I say it was inappropriate or it was wrong, in my brain, that's directed at the employee. And as I went to great lengths to tell you, Senator,
Yeah.
up until that event, that's exactly what that employee's job was to do. That employee pushes out to that listserv, which is the Better Roads community, most municipalities, all of the press releases of the governor's office, the press releases from the Agency of Transportation, the press releases from the Agency of Natural Resources, and the press releases from the Agency of Agriculture. Because those three agencies,
Not all.
almost all of them,
Well, I've been on the listserv since, and I have seen
Okay.
not very many of, I mean, I know they issue more trips.
clean water and ditching and
Yeah.
better back roads touches ag and A&R and us. So that's where I mean, in
Right.
relation to
And
that.
I don't want to get into who's in it, or I don't think it's an issue about the employee. I mean, it could be, but I don't think it is. And I'm not looking to find out who it is or that they get punished or anything like that, but
We should not do that so that this causes a situation like this going forward. I mean,
right.
and the other thing I don't want to say, and I just hope you respect me on this, is I don't want to be in a position where I feel I'm in a box to say that a press release issued by the governor's office
Right.
was an inappropriate press release.
And the governor has all the right in the world to issue the press release, and I don't care what it said in it, but it was clearly about the election.
Mhm.
And so an election email going out on the state email listserv just seemed inappropriate, and I would hope that the head of the agency would say, yeah, we don't want to do that.
And I said that. But I had no knowledge of it when it went up.
Right, and I appreciate that.
And I
you
have
said
said-
we're gonna be clear that this is not gonna
That's
happen
correct.
again.
I issued that directive that I believe you contacted me on a Sunday. And I found out where it came from the first workday. And that day I issued that statement to my directors that what we put out in the future needs to be germane to our jobs,
Yeah.
to the mission of the agency. Full stop.
And it wouldn't have been, yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And I get you don't want to say certain words, but I wanted to just get that on the record that I thought it was inappropriate. And I do appreciated your quickness in responding and getting to the base of it. And I get the sense that you agree with me, but have to say it differently. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much.
So I think we have to wrap up here now, and you'll be hearing back from our committee very soon.
All right.
And you'll probably be pleased. But I would say I do have one comment. You made a comment earlier about funding, and the issues going forward I've heard are labor funding and in the immediate FAST Act and what the feds are going to do in it. And I appreciate all of that. They made a comment about balanced budgets and where all of those are. The administration proposes we are on the hook in the legislature for appropriating the money and us. And I would just say for me that given the roles that we're in play, I'm scared about the funding for transportation moving forward. And and you've made it very clear, and I agree, and I think our committee agrees that a transportation system is vital to a society moving ahead. And in that vein, we're going to have to work together on the fiscal issues, because it is really our job to appropriate. And I glad you look at the glass half full, because sometimes it's hard to look at it and not be afraid. So but we thank you for coming today, and you'll be hearing from us very soon.
Thank you very much.
And we have 10